Hey good folks, Ranben Avraham here for Dots Plus, and in today's tutorial we are going to recreate this lovely atoms simulation. As my usual workflow goes, I'm using a depth of 32 bits, a working space of sRGB, and a linearized working space. I store my assets under the assets folder and my comps under the comps, pre-comps, and render comps folder. Right now we are in the main comp. Its resolution is 1280 by 720, frame rate of 25. The duration is right now much longer than we would need, but it's better to have it longer than shorter. During this tutorial, I will do my best to use the correct names of the different parts, but I have to advise you, by no means and by no measure should you rely on what I demonstrate here as true scientific facts. I know how to make things look good, not so great on scientific accuracy. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's begin. We would start with creating the atom body, which is completely fiction because the atom body doesn't really exist. It only seems to exist because of the electrons that orbit the nucleus. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's create the body. We'll start by creating a new solid. We'll hit Ctrl Y, and the color doesn't matter. Just make sure to use 1280 by 720, same as our composition size. This solid will be the texture of our sphere. Let's go to our effects and presets and we'll type Fractal Noise. And let's see, let's set the fractal type to dynamic. We'll go to transform and scale it up to something of this sort. And we want the evolution to run continuously. So we'll add an expression here, alt click on the stopwatch, and we'll write time times, let's say 50. Let's see how that goes. So that might be a bit slow, let's say 100. That's better. And we can always tweak it if we find it necessary. Let's rename this one to body texture. And now we can pre-compose this composition. Ctrl-Shift-C. Make sure we are moving all the attributes into the new composition and hit OK. We'll apply to this layer CC Sphere. So this will act as our body. We can scale up the radius here. And as you can see, we've got the texture running all along our sphere body and looking very nice doing that. We do have some lighting and shadows issues, which I'm not interested in. So let's go into lighting and see what we can do here. Let's set the light height to 100 so the light comes straight from the center. I would like to make this body transparent in the areas facing the camera and visible only on the edges. To do that, we'll add a circle effect. Okay, let's see what's going on here. We'll set the blending mode for now to normal so we can see what's going on, and temporarily set it to black. The color doesn't really matter, I just want to see it. Let's increase the radius to something of this sort, and we'll set the blending mode to stencil alpha. That does the complete opposite of what we want, so we'll mark invert circle. And now we have a hole in the middle. To get our desired result, we need to feather this circle quite a bit. And we need to scale up the radius, maybe lower the feather. We get a pretty nice result here, but I have to say that the circle feathering doesn't give me quite the result I'm after. So let's set that to 0. I'll add here a fast blur, because I find the fast blur to work a bit better than the feathering we get here. We'll use something of this sort, I think. We are after the inner feather only, not the outer feather. So we'll duplicate the circle and place it on top of the fast blur, and we'll set invert circle off. Now we get a smaller circle than we actually needed. So let's see, the radius here, let's make it round, let's make it 310. And we want this one to be 324, so that's 14 pixels above this one. So we'll add a nice expression here. Let's create a keyframe here and a keyframe here. We'll hit U to reveal those keyframes and delete those. I only created those to create the expression. We want this circle radius to take its value from the first circle radius, and we'll add this one 14 pixels. So anytime we'll scale up or down the radius of the first circle, we'll have the same result. We can always duplicate this body, and let's solo this one. Lower the amount of feather here, let's say to 10, and we can add nice glow here, and we'll set it beneath the fast blur. Maybe even increase the radius and lower the fast blur a bit more, something of this sort. So we get a nice highlight here. In the original preview of this tutorial, I haven't used the 3D space, even though all the layers are in 3D space and responding to the After Effects 3D camera. I would like to give you a few tips on how to create this scene in a true 3D space. Ctrl-Alt-Shift-C to create a new camera, and we'll just call it camera, no need for camera 1. I'm using the 35mm preset. To animate our camera through space, I would create a new null, Ctrl-Alt-Shift-Y, and we'll make it a 3D null, and we'll rename it to cam position. We'll duplicate it, and we'll rename the duplicate to cam rotation. So the camera is connected to the position, and the position is connected to the rotation. To understand why I created this rig for the camera, let's switch to custom view so we can see all of our layers. So there's our camera, the cam position and the cam rotation are in the same place. Let's say I would like to rotate my camera in 3D space. I can do that by using the rotation in all angles, as you can see. And let's say I want to move my camera, I'll use the position for that. So far, nothing is different here. But if I would like to rotate the camera at this point, I can still do that. And I'm rotating the camera from the center of my 3D composition. Since all my 3D layers will be in the center of my composition, I can always rotate around it. Let's go back to active camera, and we'll make the two bodies to a 3D layer. And right now, if I'll rotate around them, you can see that those are just 2D layers converted into 3D and rotating in space. So that's not exactly what we're after. To make these two layers appear as if they are true 3D layers, we'll mark them both and hit Ctrl-Alt-O to pop up the AutoOrient options, and we'll mark Orient towards camera. So now every time I rotate, the layers rotate towards my camera, and if I'll switch to the custom view, you can really see that. I rotate the camera and the layers rotate towards it. Let's switch back to our active camera, and let's hide for now the second body. Actually, let's rename those to body 1 and body 2. Okay, so let's hide the body 1, and just for a few seconds there, we'll hide both circles and the fast blur. Now, when we rotate the cam rotation null, the layer is moving with the camera, where we should see the camera rotating around the sphere. So to fix that, we'll have to use an expression. Let's open up the CC sphere effect here. We'll go to rotation and we'll create a keyframe for all the 3 rotations. So alt click on the rotation X, alt click on rotation Y, and rotation Z. We'll pick whip the sphere's rotation X and choose the X rotation of the cam rotation. We'll do the same for Y and for Z. And now, every time I rotate around, the sphere rotates with it. And since the layer itself is a 3D layer which orients towards the camera, I'm tricking the eye into believing that this is a true 3D sphere. So let's return all of these to the initial state, which was 0, and we can mark these 3 properties. We'll go to edit, copy expression only, mark body 2 and hit Ctrl V. Now we get the same expressions for body 2. And as long as we're here, I think I would like to connect the body 2 radius to body 1. So if I'll need to change those, I can do it only once. So let's see. We'll create a keyframe here for the radius, hit U, and delete that keyframe. I only did that keyframe so I can reveal the radius property here. We'll hit SS to isolate it, and we'll go to body 2, alt click on the radius, and pick whip it to body 1's radius. And now we can bring back those effects, and now everything is working well. So we've got the body ready, except for its color, and we'll take care of that a bit later. And we've got the 3D camera rig working properly. At this point, I think I would like to add the electrons, which are the particular layers that orbit the body. Let's create a new solid, Ctrl Y, and we'll rename it to particular 1, and we'll add particular to it. Okay, let's hide the body for now. For particular 1, I would just like to create a long solar snake that would orbit around my body. Let's go to the emitter and we'll shut down the velocity. We'll set it to 0. Same for random, velocity distribution, and velocity from motion. Set them all to 0, so we just get this one dot floating in space. All of our particles are emitting from this single point. I would like to control the particular from a null object. We'll add a keyframe for position XY and for position Z. Hit U and delete those. And now we have these values visible. We'll create a new null object, Ctrl Alt Shift Y. We'll name this null to particular null. We'll make the particular null a 3D layer. Let's hide these 2 nulls so they won't get in the way. And we'll hit P to reveal its position values. Alt click on the stopwatch and we'll mark just the position. That creates an expression that connects the position XY of the particular effect to the particular null XY position values. We'll alt click on the stopwatch next to position Z and pick whip to the Z position. To make sure that works correctly, let's alt click on the stopwatch and add a wiggle expression, 5 times a second and 300 pixel to all directions, and let's see, and it works correctly. Great, let's delete this expression. Now I would like the particular layer, or rather the particular null, to move around in a complete circle. I can do that using carefully placed keyframes, or I can do that using an expression, which is a much better way in this case. We'll alt click on the stopwatch next to position, radius equals 600 semicolon. This value would determine the radius of the circle that the particular null would move in. Start a new line, angle equals time times 100 semicolon. This will cause the particular null to move in a continuous loop. We'll create a new line. Actually, let's make some space here so we can see what's going on. X equals radius times math. Make sure you use the capital M here. If you don't, the expression won't work. So radius times math dot cos, open bracket, degrees to radians. Make sure you don't have any spaces and that you use capital letters as I did here. Open bracket, angle, close bracket once, close bracket twice, semicolon. Let's start a new line here. We'll copy the first line and paste it here. We'll change X to Y and change cos to sin. Okay, so that's the X and Y. Let's do the Z. So Z equals 0, semicolon. Center equals, open square brackets, 640, comma, 360, comma, 0, which is the exact middle of our composition resolution. Close square brackets and semicolon to end this line. One more line, add, open brackets, center, comma, open square brackets, X, comma, Y, comma, Z. Close square brackets, close brackets, and semicolon to end this expression. And the expression failed for some reason. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. I've made a typo here. It's not center times, it's center equals. And there you go. As you can see, we've got the null object moving around in a perfect circle. I do think we can lower the radius. Let's bring back the body. Now the body is around 300 degrees, or scale as it is. So we can change this one to 300 as well, which might be a bit too small. Yeah, it's a bit too small. So let's see, let's make it 400, or we just have to play around until we get it right. 350 might be it. Let's say 325, 335. At the moment, even though the particle circle is in 3D space, it's orbiting on the X and Y axes. And I wanted to rotate on all axes, including the Z axis. And I can get that effect by rotating the camera. So for instance, if I do this, I will get that effect. But then I would also get the rotation of the sphere. And that's not what I'm after. I want almost a free rotation of the circle here. We will need to solve that using the particular effect. So let's close the emitter here, and we'll go down to world transform. And over here we can rotate the particular 3D space, that even though it responds to the After Effects 3D space, it can be controlled using the particular rotation and offset. If I rotate it on the Y rotation, you can see I get that same effect, but the sphere doesn't rotate with it, which is what I wanted. Now I can insert a time expression to these values and get the result I want, but I am going to duplicate the particular layer several times with slightly different values, and changing the expressions on several layers isn't quite what I'm after. So what I'll do is connect the particular X, Y, and Z rotations to the particular null rotation. Right now, the particular null rotation has no actual influence on what I see. So I can use those values to influence the world transform of the particular. So let's give those keyframes. Hit U to reveal those keyframes, and we'll delete those. Let's hit SS to isolate those. I'll alt-click on the X rotation of the particular layer and pick whip it to the particular null X rotation. Same goes for the Y rotation and the Z rotation. Okay, we can now close these, and I'll apply the expression to the rotation values of the particular null. Alt click on the stopwatch next to the X rotation, and I'll write time times 10 for the X, time times 5 for the Y, and let's say time times 7 for the Z. Now, if I want to change those values, I can always do it from here, and that will affect all the duplicates of the particular that I intend to create. The effect we get is exactly what I wanted. So now that we have the movement we want, let's close the wall transform, and we'll open up the emitter, and let's see. First, I want a lot more particles than I do have at the moment. We'll increase it to around 5,000 particles. We'll give it a very small amount of velocity, let's say 5, so it will get thicker near the end of its life. We'll set the velocity random to 100. Randomness is always good. We'll set the velocity distribution to around 0.2. And we'll set the velocity from motion to 5. That would set the rear part slightly away from the sphere. Now, at the moment, the particles are born, and around at this point they are fully emitted. I want the particles to start from full emission from the start. We'll go to emission extras, and we'll set pre-run to 100, and so all the particles are already born from the start. Now let's close emitter and open up particle. We'll set the sphere feather to 100, that way they would blend in with each other a bit better. And we'll set the size to be smaller, let's say 1. We'll set the size random to 10, we don't want it to be too random. We'll set the size of a life, let's make some room here. I would like the particles to die about at this point, so about from here to here, something of this sort. And let's make it smooth. I'll leave the opacity as it is, but I'll set the opacity of life to something similar to this, but we'll start a bit later on, somewhere around here, and smooth it, so we get a more gradual fading out sort of thing. And I'll set the transfer mode to screen. That would give me a slightly better highlights. Okay, now let's close particle, and we'll open up physics. Scroll down to air, and we'll also open up turbulence field. I want to affect the position slightly, so I will get sort of a wiggle in the line here. Let's say around 50. We'll set the octave multiplier to 0. You know what? It might be a bit too much. Let's make it 40. And the line is a bit too thick, so let's go back to the emitter. And we'll set the velocity to maybe 3. That's more like it. At this point, I'm happy with the particle line that's going on here. And I'll just rename it to particle front 1. And pretty soon you'll understand why. Let's move all the camera rig downwards and paint it yellow. Now we can tell the different layers apart. And now let's duplicate particle front 1. I want to enhance the edge here a bit. Let's hide the particle front 1 so we can focus just on 2. Let's open up the emitter, and I'll set all of these to 0, so I'll get just a straight line. Let's close the emitter and move to the particle section. We'll set the life to 0.2, so it will be a lot shorter. Let's zoom in here. We'll set the size to be a little larger, so make it 2. We'll set the size of a life to be a bit longer. So let's actually make it full, and then something of this sort, and smooth it out. We'll set the transfer mode to add, make it a bit brighter. We got a slightly enhanced edge here, and we can actually make it a bit larger. Let's set the size to maybe 3, and we'll set the size of a life to maybe something like this. So we get a nice edge here. Now let's duplicate the first one again, and we'll make this one a thin line. Open up the emitter, and I'll set all of these again to 0, so I get just a straight line. Let's open up particle, and I'll make the size to 0.2. Now I would like the point to shoot out random particles to a short distance. Let's duplicate front 2, and let's isolate it. Open up the emitter again, and we'll set the velocity to 100. We'll set the velocity random to 100. We'll set the velocity distribution to 1, and velocity for motion to 50. So we get particles shooting out, which is okay, but doesn't look too good. So let's keep on tweaking it until we get something nice. Let's see, let's close the emitter and open up particle. We'll set the life to 1. We'll set the size to 2. Maybe even 1. We'll set the size of a life to be, I want it to end around here. So let's see, let's make it complete again, and then something of this sort. And we can close the particle now. At the very tip of the point, I want to have a very nice curve here. To get that, here's what we're going to do. Let's go into physics. We'll go into spherical field, and let's make the spherical field visible. Mark visualize fields. Since the spherical field strength is set to 0, we can see it. If we'll turn it on, we can really see it. So right now the spherical field is pushing away particles that are in its way, which gives us a very interesting look, but that's not what I'm really after. First of all, I need the spherical field to be at the exact tip. For that, I need to connect the position XY and position Z values to the particle null, same as I did for the emitter. So create 2 keyframes here, hit U, and again delete those keyframes, hit SS to isolate those. Let's hit P for the particle null, and we'll connect again the position XY to the position, and the position Z to the Z position. So now my spherical field is following the tip wherever it goes. Now, I don't want to push the particles away, I actually want to pull them in. So I can go to -100, and now it's turning blue and it's sucking particles in. As you can see, I'm starting to get that arch I was talking about. We'll set the radius to be a bit larger, let's say 200. That sucks almost all of the particles out. So let's see what can we do about that. Let's increase the size maybe. We can increase the particle amount. Let's double it. Let's set the radius to 150. And yeah, let's set the size back to 1. Let's feather it out, say 100. So this is without the spherical field, and this is with the spherical field. And let's shut down the visualized fields, and we can really see what's going on. You know what? Let's go into the emitter and set the velocity to 50. And we can actually give it a bit more life. Let's say 2. Well, 2 is too much, 1.5. And we can even lower the particle amount back to 5,000. Maybe even less. Let's say 1.2 for the life. Okay, and maybe velocity from motion to 25. Yeah, this is a lot more like it. So we can keep on tweaking these layers all day long, but at some point we'll have to call it finished, and this is the point for me. And body is with O, not U. You could have corrected me at some point. Okay, so this brings to a conclusion the first part of this tutorial. Up to now, we have created the atom body using the CC sphere, and we applied some expression to make sure that it rotates and faces the camera wherever the camera may go. We also have created the camera rig, and we have crafted and shaped the neutron with several particular layers. In the second part of this tutorial, we would create the rest of the neutrons. We would also create the nucleus, and we'll create the final composition we have seen in the preview. Once again, my name is Ran Ben Avraham, and I'll see you in the next part.